Welcome to today's episode of the Cross Labs podcast, On My Mind.
So, here is a question that has come up independently in a couple of different contexts that I would like to entertain and discuss, which is it possible to design a thing that is not addictive, so like ethically maybe not problematic, but also interesting? So some things can like feel open-ended or feel addicting or feel like they're going to go on forever, and is that good? Is that bad? But if we do care about the ethics of it, is it possible to make something that's not addictive but still interesting?
Just want to clarify, is the interestingness you're talking about here really just interestingness, or is it actually infinitely interesting, indefinitely interesting? Because if it's the second, then you could argue that that may actually be definitionally addictive.
Yeah, for me, the question would have been, what is the definition of addiction in this case? In your case, it's more like, well, as long as you're interested, you keep doing it, and that's what's addictive.
A lot of the definitions of these things, and I don't know if addiction happens to be one, but in a lot of the cases, it usually has to be interfering with your ability to live your life. I don't remember if addiction includes that particular caveat, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Because if you don't, then things like, well, yeah, food is addictive. You know, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and eat. Let's cure that addiction. Oops, I died. So.
But it kind of comes back to, again, like the thing we were talking about in the blog post, which is like, even if we're not thinking about like, okay, you're engaging with a thing to the point where it's like interfering with your ability to do other things in life, like there might be something that you keep checking. This example in the chat of like TikTok or something, like, yeah, you may not be like, I can't function without looking at TikTok, but it might be like, okay, I keep coming back to this thing for whatever reason.
So I guess you could have another variation of the definition, which is something would be addictive if you can't stop doing it and you want to stop. If the definition is such that you want to stop but you can't, then wanting to stop is a precondition for calling it an addiction. So if they don't want to stop, whether it's because they realize it or not, they, under that definition, wouldn't be addicted.
Yeah, maybe to motivate more of where this was coming from, to possibly sidestep the definitional issue. So something that Nicholas and I have been talking about, like in private a lot, is the idea of like idle game design. And this thing where it's like the number just goes up and it's like not a subjectively necessarily fun experience. Although that's just me saying like I don't like idle games. Some people maybe do find it like subjectively fun to just like click the thing and watch the numbers and blah blah blah.
I'll stand in for that. Sure, I can admit that I actually do find that fun.
Sure. Okay. And let's say we can sort of disagree on what makes a fun game. Yeah, that was kind of more of the question of like, if there's the core mechanic, if we can identify the draw of the thing as just like, just like the numbers going up. And that's like basically it. And you are just like coming back to this thing to watch the number go up. And there isn't really much else. Like, I don't know. Is that a game that's just like designed to take advantage of the fact that your brain likes to see the number go up?
I'm not going to say that it's good or bad to, get dopamine hits from seeing the number go up or to get dopamine hits from doom scrolling Twitter or something. But I think also there's probably an aspect of even the very, very deep parts of human civilization and culture which reduce to something like that. It may just be that everything is bad, or that the devil is in the details, and it actually matters how you personally and subjectively interface with the experience of enjoying it.
Wouldn't that be related to the sunken cost fallacy then? That at first you're interested and you just watch the numbers go up, and then at some point you're like, well, now that I've already spent that much time looking at it, maybe I'll get something down the line if I watch some more.
So the context in the blog post is that we identified like 4 mechanisms that would cause a subjective perception of open-endedness in a system. And out of the 4, 3 of them, you can argue that they're illusions. They have the form of your brain tricking you into thinking there's something there that isn't.
What's a bit concerning is that you're just describing science at this point, so...
I mean, that's kind of the thing with the blog post, and that the whole A-Life community search for open-endedness, may actually have some things that look like kinds of addictive games.
I feel like we should clarify that we're not saying that like A-Life research is stupid or unproductive.
But it is addictive.
I mean, it can be addictive. It can be. I mean, that's like the whole point. But then that comes back to like, is the goal of open-endedness research in particular to make something where if we only found the correct metric and we made that number go up, we would have done it? Or is the goal, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive, or is the goal to make a system that just like we as, researchers or scientists or whatever, We want to make a system that like we would kind of like to see. And I think in some dream world, those two things go hand in hand. I would really like there to be a number that encapsulates like what's interesting to humans, but I also don't know that that's possible to capture in like one metric.
I mean, if we're speaking in terms of neuroscience, the most obvious metrics would be just measure your level of dopamine.
The thing is, that is a metric that you would measure about the experimenter, but not about the system.
Yes.
And that is the thing that goes against the standard practice in A-Life, or about open-endedness, which is to say that open-endedness is a property of the system, not the observer.
Oh, that's interesting.
And our blog post is sort of saying, well, the things that people have identified, put mathematical numbers on, are measurable on a given system most of the time. But there's also something else that is probably worth talking about, which is if we have a goal of making a system where you could basically say, I no longer need to go out into the real world. I am just going to study this thing, and I'm going to study it for the rest of my life, and all of my students are going to study it for the rest of their lives, and all of their students are going to study it for the rest of their lives, and it will still not run out of things that are worth studying. The kind of contention or the challenge that we propose to the old ideas is that is fundamentally more about what those people find interesting than about the system itself. Lisa, does that summarize the...
Yeah. To make it slightly more philosophically, I think one of the other points we were kind of making, that how do we get narrative out of it? Fundamentally, we can't escape the fact that we're human looking at these things, and we need it to make sense to us in a way that I think goes beyond just number goes up.
Even if you did the dopamine thing, the issue would be that the person measuring the dopamine going up of the A-Life researcher in the box with the, Conway's Game of Life, I think I would claim that they themselves would not be open-endedly interested in that system. So it may be that the A-Life researcher in the box doesn't want the experiment to end, but the guy measuring the dopamine at some point would be like, you know what, I haven't learned anything new from this, I'm going to shut it down. But a lot of the times there's an assumption that if we achieve open-endedness, which may mean this or that metric going up forever, that system will be interesting because it's open-ended. And I think that's false. And it matters because if what we're trying to do is make an artificial system that addicts us to it, then we'll keep failing, basically, even though we'll succeed in making systems that are open-ended, they won't be open-ended in a way that matters to us. And so what happens, practically speaking, is then people move the goalposts and they say, oh, that must not have been the real mathematical definition of open-endedness because it wasn't interesting. So we have to change the definition. And then the next one will make a system that's interesting. And then someone makes the system and it's not interesting. And so they'll change the definition again. And you just have this eternal race for finding definitions and then being bored with them.
Yeah, but the way you're defining it makes it kind of impossible to have a definition of open-endedness, because if it has to depend, if the open-endedness of the system depends on the point of view of the observer or the experimenter in this case as well, it means that for each person, depending on your personality, your things that makes you happy and so on and so forth, you'll have a different definition of what an open-ended system is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of impossible to just say, oh, there will be at some point a mathematical definition of this is what open-endedness is, or this is the exact measure you have to make go up for the system to be open-ended.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is kind of what I'm arguing.
Well, that's a bit dystopian, but I like it.
That's it for this week's episode of the Cross Labs podcast On My Mind. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you'll be the first to know when the next episode is out. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.